Military spending. In this document, in my promise to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013, is going to be a 43% reduction in military spending. I think the biggest threat to our national security is the fact that we're spending so much more money than what we're taking in, and that we're bankrupt, and that if we don't fix this, we're going to find ourselves in the midst of a monetary collapse. So, military spending. Can we provide a strong national defense for this country and still cut military spending by 43%? I think the operative question here is defense. The operative word is defense. And yes, we can, as opposed to offense and as opposed to nation building. So 43% reduction in military spending. Do we need 2,300 nuclear warheads? Do we need to blow up the world 9 times, or will 4 times do? So I think we can cut our nuclear warheads from 2,300 to 500. I think that we can reduce our military presence worldwide by 43%. Do we need 100,000 troops in Europe? Might 57,000 troops do? I have a hard time understanding why we have any troops at all in Europe, much less 100,000. So I think there's room to do this. Those in uniform, the civilian support to those in uniform, research and development. We seem to continue to be fighting wars in the past as opposed to what's happening in the future. And we've talked about this for decades, but we've never really taken steps to make sure that that happens. And then the conflicts that we're currently involved in. I was opposed to Iraq before we went into Iraq. I think there needs to be a military threat from abroad before we take military action. I didn't see that Iraq had any weapons of mass destruction, but if they would have had weapons of mass destruction, this is going back to 2003, gosh, don't we have the military surveillance capability to see them roll out these weapons of mass destruction? And if they do, we can go in and deal with that. If we go into Iraq, aren't we going to find ourselves in a civil war to which there would be no end? Afghanistan, I thought initially, was totally warranted. We were attacked, we attacked back, and after having been in Afghanistan for 6 months, we wiped out Al-Qaeda. That was 10 years ago. So we're building, and other countries in the world, and don't we have those same needs here in this country? Libya, I was immediately. Aren't we still involved in a civil war in Libya? Where was the military threat from Libya? And we're going to end up picking a winner and loser in Libya. And might that turn out similar to Mubarak in Egypt, where this turned out to be the lesser of two evils, and we were making that decision as opposed to the Egyptian people? Let's stop our foreign involvement in other countries, but let's maintain this notion that we should provide ourselves with a strong national defense, and it should be based on a military threat first and foremost. So that's reducing federal government expenditures by 43%. I believe in free markets. I believe there's a magic to free markets. Free market approaches to healthcare, free market approaches to energy, free market approaches to education. What's the best thing that the federal government could do when it comes to education in this country? I think it's to abolish the Federal Department of Education, and here's why. The Federal Department of Education gives each state about 11 cents out of every dollar that every state spends. But it comes with 16 cents to send them in the first place to have it sent back as less money to begin with. And do you all know when the Department of Education was established in this country? I think most people are surprised to find out that it was 1979 that the Department of Education was established. Just get the Department of Education eliminated, give education to the states, 50 laboratories of innovation and best practice, and that's just what you'll have. spectacular success by some states that'll get emulated, some miserable failure by other states that'll get avoided. But in a 50-state laboratory, we're going to improve education in this country dramatically, as opposed to Washington knows best, Washington top-down really has the answers. I am not in the debates. Out of 15 debates, I've been in 2 of the debates. And may I explain to you why I haven't been in the debates? You might be thinking, well, it's because you don't have a certain percentage in the polls. Well, I'm not in the polls that they're determining whether or not I get into the debates. That's not fair. 5 CNN polls ago had me at 2% of the national vote. That tied me with Kane. That put me ahead of Huntsman and Santorum. In their next 4 national polls, they took my name off of the poll. When the networks determine who gets in the debates, they're saying you have to have a certain percentage, you have to have a certain polling in A, B, C poll. I'm not in A, B, C poll. By any measurement, that's not fair. During the last Fox debate, Fox chose to determine or interpret those rules as the last 5 national polls where my name was in the poll. I thought that was fair. And last week, CNBC held a debate where they had 2 criteria for the debate. One was you had to be registered to run for president, which I am. The other one was you had to be at 3% in any national poll before November 1st. You can't make that up, right? You can't make the result up either. I was at 3% in a Gallup poll in May. I was excluded from that debate, and CNBC refused to answer our calls to CNBC to demand inclusion in a debate based on their criteria. I'm not in the debate, but I think I offer a different voice in every single issue. And if I may give you an example of how I differ from every other candidate on that stage, and use immigration as that issue. When it comes to the debate on stage, candidate number 1 wants to build a fence across the border. Candidate number 2 wants to build a parallel fence to the first fence. Candidate number 3 wants to run a moat down the middle of those 2 fences. Candidate number 4 wants to run barbed wire across the top of the 2 fences. Candidate number 5 wants to electrify the barbed wire. And candidate number 6 wants to have drone patrols over the entire fence. The answer is to not build a fence. Don't build a fence. It would be an incredible waste of money. And then for the only candidate up there who doesn't want to build a fence, which is Rick Perry, who's a border governor, New Mexico former governor, border governor, don't build a fence. Build a fence around Washington to keep you in or out of Washington. If you decide you want to get in and out of Washington and there's a fence and you're telling me that that's going to keep you in or out, it's not. It's an incredible waste of money. But the only other governor that says don't build a fence is Rick Perry. But you know what Rick Perry has to say with regard to the drug violence on the border? And the fact that 40,000 people have died over the last 4 years because of the drug violence? He wants to add guns to that equation. He wants to militarize the border even more than it already is. So combat guns with more guns, and actually every other candidate on stage also agrees with that, with the exception of Ron Paul. But Ron Paul wants to build a fence. I'm not sure why that's the case. Don't build the fence. Make it as easy as possible for somebody that wants to come into this country and work to get a work visa. Not a green card, not citizenship, but just a work visa so that we can conduct a background check and make sure that there aren't criminals coming into the country. We can give them a Social Security card so that applicable taxes would get paid. And if we implement the fair tax, it won't even be an issue because the fair tax is unavoidable. Whether you're a legal or illegal immigrant or a visitor, everybody pays the fair tax. It's unavoidable. And then when it comes to border violence, legalize marijuana, and arguably 75% of the border violence with Mexico will go away because that's the estimate of the drug cartel's activities that are engaged in the marijuana trade. If we can't connect the dots between 40,000 deaths south of the border over the last 4 years with prohibition and the fact that when we prohibited alcohol, disputes got played out on the streets with machine guns, got played out in the streets with guns as opposed to in the courts. Let's get these issues in the courts. Let's bring an end to border violence. Let's bring an end to the violence that exists in this country because of drug prohibition. So I am the different voice. I wouldn't be in this contest if it weren't about the issues. It's about the issues. And it's about an optimism about the future of this country. We can fix these issues. Social Security is an issue that also comes up. Under the fair tax, you won't pay Social Security anymore as part of the withholding out of your payroll check. You'll get your full payroll check. And your employer won't pay the match to Social Security anymore. The proceeds for the fund for Social Security will come out of the fair tax. But Social Security is not cutting Social Security. Very simply, Social Security is a system that needs to take in more money than what it pays out. So to do that, we can raise the retirement age. We can have a means testing that's very fair. And that would be that if you paid in a certain amount of money into Social Security, which in the fair tax, this becomes a non-issue. But for those that have paid into Social Security, here's what you paid in, here's what your employer has matched that. A means testing would be, should you be able to get more money back than what you paid in if you're making a certain amount of money? I think a means testing would be something very fair, and it would save a lot of money when it comes to Social Security. And also change the escalator that's built into Social Security from the wage index to the inflation rate. So without exception, I think the issues of the day here need to be met by common sense solutions that really are optimistic. We should be optimistic about our future. We can set a course here where for the next 100 years we can have prosperity, we can have peace, and we can be vigilant to what are bad actors out there. And government has a role. Government absolutely has a role. Do I want to eliminate the EPA? No, I don't want to eliminate the EPA. I think there's a 43% largesse built into most government that a 43% reduction in federal spending will really bleed out that largesse. But the EPA, for example, there are polluters. And as governor of New Mexico, I saw it. And if it wasn't for the EPA, they'd still be polluting to this day. But because of the EPA, we were able to shut them down. And I, as governor, was able to use that agency to be able to do that. So government has a role to protect us against individuals that would do us harm, and that's businesses that would do us harm. And government has a role to provide for a strong national defense, that we're not threatened militarily, and that our way of life ends up changed. I really appreciate all of you being here live. I really appreciate everybody on Yowie tonight. This is our third Yowie town hall, and really this is an opportunity for anybody in the world to come online and ask a question and to participate in this forum. So I think we'll start that, and that will be a process of questions, comments, insults. Bring them on. We're going to alternate between a live audience, which gets seen on the Yowie feed, and then those online.
David McDonald from UCLA. My question would be, who would you think is your greatest intellectual influence?
You know, it might be Milton Friedman. I just, the more I read school choice, talking about drug reform, talking about